All right, before we jump in today, I got to tell you something so important. In my last video, I stressed how important it is. Actually, maybe in multiple videos, I stressed how important it is to test your sound before going through an entire shooting session. And I was sitting down for this session today, and I think, oh, you know what? I've done this so many times in this exact spot with this exact setup. I'm fine. Let's just roll. And then I was like, nah, let's just run that sound test just to be sure. And guess what? I pull up my little test, and there's no audio at all. I'm looking around and I remember I forgot my little adapter for my wireless Go. So I could have sat through the next 20, 25 minutes, however long it takes to get through this video footage, and then found that I didn't even have any audio. And nothing sucks more when you're creating your videos than doing something like that. So don't make the same boneheaded mistake I almost made. Always test your sound. All right, today we're actually going to be talking about how to edit the video footage that you take after you record it. So if you haven't watched my previous episode where I talk about the actual shooting, or for that matter, any of the previous episodes about everything that leads up to that stage, go do that now. Otherwise, let's dive in, and we're going to talk about the simplest way I can think of to edit footage, assuming you need to edit it at all. Now, on that note, let's keep in mind that if you're doing very casual vlog content, there's a very good chance, especially if you're great speaking and being on camera, that you're just going to shoot it, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Maybe you make a few mistakes in there, a few flubs. It's not a big deal. So you could literally publish that footage as is. But I'm going to show you some footage where there even just maybe a little bit of trimming pieces that we maybe want to do, or inserting some additional video components. Maybe we want to do some text overlays. Anything just to give it a bit more of a pop when people are watching it, to make it a little bit more compelling than just a talking head. So today, that's what we're going to jump into. Let's do it now. All right, everything up to this point has been about simplicity, because everything I do is about simplicity, right? If you want to have professional level stuff, and I mean really top notch, then go out and get yourself the DSL camera that we've talked about. Get yourself all of the equipment and lenses and everything else that has to go along with that. And that's also going to impact what you're going to use to edit your footage. Today, we're going to keep things simple by introducing a few very basic apps that are going to get you 90 to 95% of everything that you could ever want when you're editing these particular videos, but they're going to do it in a much simpler user interface. So here are a few options. Number one, I have to assume that maybe the vast majority of you are going to be on Windows, because that's just what the landscape looks like. Some of the programs that we're going to talk about today are Apple only, and those would be things like iMovie, and actually you may be able to get that for Windows, even though it's built primarily for Apple, and Apple's Final Cut Pro, which is a pro-level platform. Now, today we're going to talk about a couple of others, and they are from Adobe. What I like about Adobe is it's platform agnostic. In fact, it even goes beyond desktop. So I don't care if you're on Windows desktop or Apple Mac OS desktop or on an iPad or even on an Android device. Adobe makes these apps available even on the mobile side. So you can do it on desktop the way I'm going to show you today, or you can do it on your tablet the way I'm going to show you today. As a matter of fact, you can even do a lot of this on your smartphone, although I don't recommend it because the screen is just too small to make it really usable. I think you're going to drive yourself nuts trying to do that. All right, anybody who knows me can tell you that I'm not the world's biggest Adobe fan. My agency has actually been high-level partners with Adobe in various capacities over the past couple of decades, but I feel like they've got a lot of room to improve on some of their systems, on some of their platforms, some of their apps. But it's still about the best thing that you can get your hands on right now. So one of the industry standards for editing your videos is going to be Adobe Premiere Pro. In fact, you're going to find films and commercials and other high-end professional footage being edited in Premiere Pro. The problem is, even though it's a very capable system, it's also a very complicated one. So it takes time just to learn what to do. And what I found is that even when you're very comfortable understanding what to do, it still tends to take a lot longer to do each of those things because the interface is so much more complex and you have to go to so many different areas. What I like is something nice and simple, so simple in fact, that I can also do it on the iPad. And as I've talked about in my previous videos in this series, one of the cool things is being able to shoot on an iPad and then immediately edit on the iPad. And then you can just syndicate the content from there. So it really simplifies and just combines all of these different components in video production down into a single device. That's a time saver. So what we're going to talk about today, what I'm going to demonstrate today, is a very simplified version of Adobe Premiere Pro, and it's called Adobe Premiere Rush. Again, this one's available for desktop, and it works on Mac, and it works on Windows. I also run the app on my iPad so that we can edit that way. Here's a funny little note. We actually prefer to use Rush on our iPad, just because it's so simple to tap with your finger. So if you happen to have a tablet, give it a try. I think you'll find it to be very user-friendly. That said, the user interface is nearly identical on the desktop version. So whatever you prefer, that's the way to go. Now, as far as costs, the way that Adobe works now is they have this Creative Cloud license, and we pay $50 per person per month to have access to the full Adobe library. It's a massive amount of software. I know for a fact that you can get the app version for your mobile device, your tablet, for somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 to $10 per month, I believe, which includes a lot of cloud storage. But if you want it for the desktop, I think that you can probably get it for about the same on a monthly basis. But it will typically be that recurring kind of fee, because it includes the cloud storage for all of the movies you're creating. Now, before you start editing your videos, there's an important thing to keep in mind, and that is, where do you actually want to syndicate or publish your videos? Because that can have a pretty big impact on how you edit. Here's an example. At the time of this publication, the limit for LinkedIn native videos, so to be able to upload directly to your LinkedIn profile, is 10 minutes. Now, most of my videos come in above 10 minutes now, which means I can't even post them to LinkedIn natively. Instead, I have to upload them to YouTube, which I'm doing already. And then I take the code or the link from my YouTube video and I put that into a post on LinkedIn. So it ends up kind of embedding the video on LinkedIn, but it doesn't actually live on LinkedIn. Pros and cons there. Number one, all social networks prefer native content. They want you to upload things that kind of belong in their ecosystem. So when you're just bringing over a link from YouTube and putting it on LinkedIn, you might be less than stellar in terms of being able to leverage the algorithm they have for showing your content to more people. But when you're left with almost no option, the way I am because of my longer videos, that tends to be the way to go. If you know for a fact that you want to share all of your content primarily on Instagram, so IGTV, or on LinkedIn, just make sure you're keeping those limitations in mind, both as you record and as you edit, so that you can make sure you stay within those parameters. I think it's 1 to 15 minutes currently for IGTV in terms of video length. And like I said, at this time on LinkedIn, it's 10 minutes max, although I wouldn't be surprised if they change those numbers as time goes on. Now, at this point, you may be wondering a little bit about YouTube versus LinkedIn versus Instagram versus, we talked about my blog. How do these things fit in? How do I know which one I'm going to be targeting? And that's really a case-by-case thing, and we're going to talk about that more in the next episode. But for now, just keep in mind that you need to consider whether you're primarily wanting to use these videos to serve an existing audience. So maybe it's people who are already going to your website. Maybe it's existing clients because you're creating training materials. Or if you really want it for prospecting, so for inbound marketing, the ability to publish this and then have people view it and come to you because they want to work with you. I would imagine 95% of us are kind of thinking in that direction because that's one of the most compelling reasons to create this kind of video content in the first place. So again, we'll talk about those decisions more in the next lesson. All right, let's jump into Adobe Premiere Rush. I'm going to do it on desktop, but keep in mind, the user interface, like I said, is nearly identical on tablet. So it's really up to you as to which one to use. Either way, I think this is going to give you a great idea of how this works. So the first thing we want to do is create a new project. I'll just click on that button. And this is a little inconspicuous, but it's down here at the very bottom that we are going to put in a project name. So I'm just going to do example right here. And then we typically need to add some level of media content to this just to create it. Now, this is in the wrong folder right here. So if I go up to my BGD folder, I'm going to pull this video in right here. And for now, that's the only one I'm going to bring over. I'll show you how to add more momentarily. Before I click Create, I'm going to look right over here and I see Sync with Creative Cloud. That's the Adobe Creative Cloud. If I choose that, then it's going to synchronize this work up to their servers. And again, that's part of what you pay for, is that subscription to their software. The other thing I would check is Copy Media. And what that's going to do is give you a little bit of redundancy so that if you go back and forth between desktop and mobile, you've got access to all of your files. But it also means if your hard drive crashes, that stuff's going to be up in the cloud so you can download it and you haven't lost all that work. Because this one's an example, I'm not going to check those. I'm just going to click Create. All right, great. So now it's opened up our timeline and I can see the clip that I put in there. And you'll notice this is all one video clip because all I imported was a single video. I can also scroll in and out to get closer or to get farther away on that timeline so that I have more or less detail, but depending on what I need to see. Now, if I want to add additional content, I can go right up here to Add Media, and then I can choose. I'm going to choose Media. You also have the option of doing a voiceover. That can be handy for certain applications where maybe you have some what we call B-roll or shots of things that are around your office or your facility or wherever you are, but you want to be talking over those. I tend to build all of my audio, all of my voice into the actual vlog video, so I typically don't need to do that. What I do like to do is add this new trailer that I've got, and I happen to have it right in here, and there it is. It's called the Distill Opener. So you can search anything from your photos library to your file library to various other things that appear in your Finder, and then just click on Add, and it's going to import those additional files. So I'm going to get rid of this then. There we go, clean this back up. And the thing is, my original video is so huge that you can barely see what I added on the end because that's only a few seconds long. So what I'm actually going to do is just trim this down because we don't even need that much for the demo here. And then I'm going to zoom in like I mentioned. All right, so now you can see that we have two different video clips, my original vlog and then the intro that I added to the end. So those are separate video clips, and you can tell because they're separate orange boxes when you click on each one. So let's take a look here. I'm going to go all the way to the beginning of the video, and then we can play, and I want to show you the types of things that we can do to edit. Notice that I'm not speaking in the video. And this is how I start most of mine out. Let's start talking about cameras. The very first one I showed you was an iPhone. All right, so that's when I start speaking. So one of the things I know I'm going to want to do is just trim the very front, and that's a very common thing to do. So I'll show you how to do that in a second. But before we get into any actual slicing and dicing of this footage, there's an important thing that I want to show you. And that is anything that you want to do to this video to optimize things like the color or the audio, I recommend doing right away. And the reason for that is if I first slice and dice this into 25 different chunks because I'm trying to remove some mistakes that I made or some redundancies or rearrange things because I want them in a new order, then I would have to go into each one of those clips individually and run all of the same filters on each one. So it's easier to forget to do that, not to mention it takes a whole lot more time. So at this point, let's just jump over, and I'm going to show you a couple of the things that I typically do with my vlog content just to optimize. So over here on the top, we have some additional functions available. The second one down is for transitions. The third one's for color. This one is for speed. Next one's for our audio, and the last one is for cropping and zooming and spinning. Now the top one I'll actually demonstrate for you momentarily because that's how I put text overlays onto the video. But let's start with color because that's one thing that I want to have be universal. Now in the professional world, they call this color grading. So a lot of times they're going to use the flat or kind of raw, uncolored, unoptimized video footage that ends up looking very washed out. And the reason for that is they want to be able to color grade it specifically to their desires for that video. What that means on a very simple application like what we're working with here is that maybe we're going to go with a built-in preset. Now what I like to do is pull up one of these that adds some real vibrance and some saturation so it makes it more colorful, and you can play around with each one of these just by clicking. So I happen to like Kodak and Fuji for the video footage that I do sitting right here. Those are both really good, so I tend to just choose whichever one of those looks best based on the lighting that I have coming through the windows and how that gets added to the box light that I have in here. So let's just do Kodak for now, and that's great. The other thing that I like to do, as Aaron points out constantly, is this vignette. So if we go into the edit piece and then scroll down to the bottom, you're going to see that we have this vignette slider. And because I like vignette, you might think, okay, well, we've got to add more vignette, right? So let me do that. I'm going to add all the vignettes. And what that actually does is puts a light glow around the outside, kind of in an oval shape. But that's not what I want. I actually want it to be a dark glow. So what we do is we go all the way down to -3 to get that nice vignette feel. Now, this isn't great for all footage, for sure. But when you're doing vlog style, where you are the subject and you're right in the middle, I think this really helps create this tunnel vision effect that really puts the focus on my face and makes the other things kind of blended into the background. So it's just one more visual trick to kind of draw focus and separate the subject from the rest of the video. All right, so at that point, I think I'm done with color. So nice and simple. Again, these are things that would take quite a while if I was doing it in Premiere Pro. Next one I'm going to do is audio. And that's because I am in our loft that has hardwood floors. We've got solid flat surfaces all over the place. It's very modern, so there's very little in terms of fabrics. There's no carpet in here. We get a lot of echo in this space. So I happen to know from doing these episodes over and over that I can come in here and do pretty much the same set each time, and it's going to turn out about as good as I can make it. Now, number one, up here under basic, we've got clip volume. So if you find that the volume of your video is too low, you can bump that up. But no, it's actually amplifying that audio track, which means you're going to get distortion as you do it. If you'd like to have it twice as loud as it is in your footage, then you're going to bump this up and notice that, yeah, it's a whole lot louder, but it's also really harsh. So if you find that that's happening to you, I would definitely recommend revisiting what you're using for your microphone setup to see if you can make some adjustments there so that the original audio file is louder by default. Next thing I'm going to do is expand the advanced area down below. And I know that it's already detected voice content for this, which is great. So it's going to optimize for voice content. I also sometimes do balanced sound, which really just means that it's going to take any lower or higher, louder or quieter portions of that audio track and try to even them out so that you don't have all those peaks and valleys. I typically don't need to do that when I'm in this quote unquote studio. Reduce background noise. If you're filming outside or in another noisy area, checking that box and then playing around with the intensity is probably a great idea. I actually don't have background noise in this space other than the echo of my own voice. So what I end up doing is clicking on Reduce Echo. And again, I know from playing around already that the optimal for me is right there at that midpoint of intensity of 50. Now, what happens if I go even higher than that? Because you probably still do notice an echo in the audio track here. Well, it starts to distort my voice. So there's always that trade-off. You can't just perfect the echo side without having an effect on the standard voice that you want to keep in there. So you've got to find that middle ground. And it's really easy with this slider to just play around. Now, one thing that we use from time to time, and mostly when I'm doing outdoor footage, is the enhanced speech. And then you can choose between male or female. It actually works really well, although again, in this particular studio setup, I find that it distorts more than it helps. So I leave that one unchecked. But you can just play around with those. They're very simple to understand. They're very simple to play with, and it gives you a preview so you can hear everything live as you're playing your video and then make those adjustments as necessary. So once we've gotten everything where we really like it, in the audio and in the color, I can start cutting my video into various components. And as I do so, all of those settings that we just put in there are going to carry through to each one of the individual clips. So let's talk about how we do that real quick. First thing, I'm going to go right back to the beginning here again. And I'm going to play. So again, you notice that this is just the setup. So I'm just thinking about what I'm going to say, getting ready, getting in the mood. And there I start to speak. So what I'm going to do, again, is zoom in a bit over here. And I'm going to take this back. I'm just going to scrub it, as we call it. So I'm going to move this. And you can see right there is maybe a fraction of a second before I start speaking. And that's where I want my actual video to start. Now, what I could do is trim right here. So I could clip the video right in half there, and then I could just select the one on the left and delete it. But once I delete it, it is gone forever. So there's a lossless way to do this so that I can make adjustments later if I determine I want to. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come over to the left side, and you'll see that my mouse cursor changes, and you would just click and hold if you were doing this on a tablet. And then I'm going to click and hold and drag it right over to that spot. And when I let go, boom, it pulls everything back over to the left. And now, if I push play, you're going to find that it goes straight into my dialogue. All right, let's start talking about camera. Great. So the next thing that I might want to do is say after 15 seconds, maybe I put some sort of a hook into the beginning of my video. And I do recommend that. If you can think of some way to say, hey guys, if I could teach you a way in the next 20 minutes to be able to put 2,000 to 3,000 words of articles on your blog every single day, and you could do it in only 15 minutes, and you wouldn't have to type a single word on your computer, would that be interesting to you? Well, that's what we're going to cover today. Boom. So then I could go into some sort of an intro, and I really like doing that. So I'm just going to pick a very random spot in my video right here, and I'm going to say that's where I'm going to stick that intro. So then I'm going to come over here and click on the clip, and now you can see as I click on each side that it has literally split those into 2 clips. Now I'm going to come back over and scroll. I'm going to scroll way out here because I want to take that intro that I brought in earlier. I'm going to click it and I'm going to drag it to right in between. So now let's see what happens when I push play. There we go, right into my intro, plays that logo sting, and then goes back to my video. All fine and dandy, but if I zoom in over on that again, scroll right over, you'll see that we do have those really harsh transitions. It goes directly from one clip to the other, and maybe I want to soften that a little bit. So that's where we're going to come up here and click on our transitions icon. Now, when we're talking about Premiere Rush, there are only these 3 that are built in. In Premiere Pro, there are a lot more, so it gives you some of that option. But here, I think what I'm going to do is choose a dip to black. I'm going to drag it to right between those 2 clips. And what that'll do is create a transition where it fades from this clip of the video into black and then into the intro that I have. Now, because that intro is all black, you won't really notice that second half of this, but watch how it fades very quickly into black from this video clip. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing over on this side, and then it's going to soften it a bit as it goes back into the video. So just a nice subtle way to be able to go from one clip to another without having that harsh break. Now note also that if I say, gosh, that was a really fast fade to black, I would like it to take a bit longer, I can come in here and select that transition that overlays both the clips, and then I can drag using my mouse cursor on the left and right side to make that go however far out I'd like. By the way, if I click on it, you can also come over here to the edit and then just change the duration manually to be whatever number of seconds you want it to be. So now when we do it, you're going to notice that fade coming in slower. And again, you won't really notice it when it goes out over the intro because of the black background. So that's transitions in a nutshell. We'll talk about another kind here next. Let's say I want to cut out a mistake that I made right here in my video. So I know first of all, I'm going to put that right at the beginning of my mistake, and I'm going to clip it. And instead of deleting that mistake, I'm going to leave it in there, and we're going to do another lossless edit. So I could say, all right, well, this is the left half of that mistake, so I want it to go back this far. This is the right half of that mistake, so I want it to go to the point where I do it over. And the way that we know that is just by kind of playing that over and over and getting it tweaked to exactly where we want. You'll notice as I do that this likes to snap right to our marker. So a nice thing to do is just kind of scrub right to the point where you know you want it, and then let it snap straight to that point. Now, there are a lot of professional YouTubers who have made a real habit out of doing this really cool trick where they just slice and dice their content to the point where it's like 3 times a second sometimes. They're jumping from one chunk of a clip to another, so it removes almost all gaps between everything they say, removes any mistakes that they have in there, and sometimes they even get creative and just start combining different words to make it say something that they didn't even say. It's a pretty cool trick, but you really need to make your entire video kind of focused on that style, otherwise it's going to seem really weird. So let me show you an example. I'm going to push play, and let's see what happens as it tries to go from this chunk of the clip to the next. Did you see that? So notice that even if I cut out a mistake, it's not necessarily going to seem like a smooth transition. And that's especially true if we're moving our body. I could be closer or farther from the camera. Maybe I'm using wild arm gestures and then all of a sudden they're gone. And so it ends up looking just like that. I talk like this, but you really notice it because of the differences in the video. So one of the things that we can do is use a transition for that. And I find that if you're kind of going from one sentence to another and you want to make it obvious that this is an edit, this dip to white works really well. So I'm going to pull that one over. And the reason is this white one it's like a windshield wiper or like a portal or a doorway. When you see it, it's almost like, okay, we're doing a bit of a reset here. So I feel like it really helps with those more jagged seams that we end up having in our video. So let me push play. Okay, so it doesn't matter what kind of body position I have from one side to the next because we're making it super obvious that this is a seam. All right, next, let's talk about a little trick that we use in here. And this is, frankly, one of the biggest reasons that I end up working with Premiere Rush instead of iMovie for Apple. Because the iMovie piece is free for every device I have. And it's very simple, it's native. I know it's built by Apple, they do a fantastic job. But they do have a real limitation, and that is when it comes to layering tracks within our footage. So to show you that, let's just come down here, and I'm going to click on this icon at the bottom, and this really gives us a good illustration of the concept of tracks. So we have our main track right in here, and that includes both audio and video. However, we've got all of these additional tracks available to us, so we could do other sound effects. We can throw in music tracks in the background. We can even split the audio by right-clicking on one of these and saying separate audio, so we can have that as a separate track. These things can be really handy for some of our more creative editing. Up above, we have some additional tracks available so that we can put video or other image-based elements on top of our video, and that's really handy. So let's do one of those. I'm going to come up here to our text overlay piece, our titles, and then you'll see that we've got this pretty big library available from Premiere Rush. So I didn't create any of these. These come by default, and it's really handy. So let's go over to right here in this spot, okay? And let's say that what I'm going to say out loud is never throw your iPhone. So I want to have a visual piece that goes along with that as I say it, okay? So I'm just going to choose the very first title here, but they're all these different styles. And what we'll do then is just come in here and edit this text. Never throw your iPhone. Okay, so now we've got a text overlay. This is not possible in iMovie, and that's really annoying. I'm not sure why. It doesn't seem like it's that tricky, but it's this feature alone that really kind of pushes me in the direction of Premiere Rush because it gives you a lot of ability to do a lot of similar things. Let me show you a few more. Over here, we've got this blue chrome left piece, so all of these pre-built styles. And now if I come over here, you'll see that that's actually an animation. So this could be new style. Maybe it's going to be your name and your title or somebody that you're interviewing, and you can have that text show up above. So it's really handy. There are also things in here for things like this video, thumbs up, or subscribe to our channel. All these little animations are pre-built, and in addition to those that we see right here, we can go into more titles, and this is going to allow us to go through what looks like about 30 pages right here of pre-built styles from Adobe that you can leverage to do these overlays. Really adds a lot of capability. It can be a lot of fun. All right, once we've edited our video and we've got it just the way we like it, what we need to do in Premiere Rush is export that video. So we just go up here, and instead of edit, we're going to click on the Share tab. And you will notice that we have the ability here. It says, oh, I want to publish to Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and some of these are possible, but honestly, I never recommend it. Number one, Instagram won't even publish to Instagram. It tells you how to do it. Number two, when it comes to YouTube, we want to optimize, and we're going to talk about that in the next episode, exactly how to optimize. So we certainly don't want to have Premiere Rush put that content up for us. There's just way more we need to do. All we really care about here is the local file. We want it to export a version of the video to us so that we can then upload that and use it where we want. So what we're going to do is put in our file name, and for this, I'll just call it example1. And we're going to tell it where we want to save to, and I'm just going to throw it on desktop because that's what I do. And under advanced settings, we can change some things for like presets. So YouTube 1080p Full HD is a very common one for me. I know for a fact that what I'm using right here for my video source is 1080p. I know I'm gonna put it on YouTube, so I can really leave it at automatic. If, on the other hand, this was 4K video, super high resolution that I was editing, but I didn't want to export it that way because the file size would be way too big considering the type of content it is, then I could come in here and say, you know what, let's just do that YouTube 1080p. Or I could even come down here, under resolution and just change it that way, even without a preset. Otherwise, just exporting it under automatic is going to really allow each one of the networks that I upload it to do their own optimizations, and it's going to be just fine. So I can leave those as is, and I'm just going to close advanced settings so we get that out of the way, and then I would click export. Once I do that, it's going to create our video. It's going to be an MP4 video file, which is compatible with virtually anything you're going to want to do. So now that we have our video file, what are we going to do with it? Where do we put it? That's what we're going to talk about in the next episode. I'm going to show you how to get it up onto LinkedIn and Instagram, IGTV, and YouTube, and most importantly, perhaps up to your blog so that we can also get that search engine optimization component built into our efforts. So don't miss that episode. If you want to make sure that you don't miss it, go ahead and subscribe to this channel right now and make sure you hit the notifications bell afterwards so that it gives you the notifications as soon as we post new content. I'll see you there.